Welcome, fourth graders of Seneca County. We're glad to have you back at our virtual school days and our opening event here by Mr. Mark Steinmetz. Mark is a gem of Seneca County, a plethora of history and knowledge, and a collector of artifacts here in Seneca County, is a member of the Seneca County Historical Society, and we're presenting today and providing you a snippet in the history of Tiffin and Seneca County by giving you a presentation today of Josiah Hedges and the founding of Tiffin. A couple of reminders for those that maybe were not able to join our first session today is that we will be starting promptly at the assigned start times. If you are unable to join promptly at the start time, or you have to miss a session for some reason, they will be available for streaming shortly after the end of the session by clicking on the YouTube link that is provided. Also, our live chat is available. Please use that live chat to ask questions, both technical in nature, but about the content that's being communicated with you today. We want to engage, we want to help you provide the best experience possible for the fourth graders here today. So with that, we thank you for your time again here, and thank Mr. Mark Steinmetz, and I'll turn it over to Mark.
Good morning, everyone. Glad that you could join us today, and glad we can keep this tradition alive of bringing our local history to everybody. We're going to learn a little bit today about Josiah Hedges. He is the founder of Tiffin, and what I have on display right now is a portrait of Josiah Hedges, and on the left and on the right is a picture of the historical marker, which is down on South Washington Street, right by the river there, and it explains the importance of the founding of Tiffin. Okay, who was Josiah Hedges?
Your voice is okay.
Josiah Hedges, he was actually a distinguished member, his family came from a distinguished member of the English people, and his great-great-grandfather had been knighted many years ago, and Sir Charles Hedges was a member of the English Parliament. He was born in Berkeley County, Virginia on April 9th, 1778, and he was one of 11 children. Hedges received only a basic education, but by the age of 18, he was already developed his own business. In 1797, he lived near Wheeling and was shipping fruit and produce to New Orleans by way of the Ohio and the Mississippi rivers. Quite a job, quite a thing for a young man, only 18 years old. In 1801, he moved to St. Clairsville, Ohio, and opened a successful store. And his store was so successful, it required him to travel 300 miles to Philadelphia twice a year just to replenish his stock of merchandise. So back in those days, 300 miles took a long time by horse and by wagon. And again, at a young man, as a young age, it's quite a responsibility. While in St. Clairsville, he was also the first sheriff of Belmont County and later the clerk of the county. In 1819, Hedges opened a branch store in Mansfield, and he later moved there. And several other family members were also living in Mansfield. This shows an old 1820s map of what it looked like in the United States. Actually, back then there was no West Virginia. Virginia contained both West Virginia and Virginia. It wasn't until the 1860s that the state was divided up into West Virginia and into Virginia. But in 1878, we can see there where he was born, roughly in the area of Berkeley County. In 1801, we find that he moved to Belmont County, Ohio. In 1819, he moved to Mansfield. And in 1820, he visited the area which would become Tiffin, and he actually purchased the land to found the city of Tiffin. Now, before Hedges got here, what was here? Well, Fort Ball was built in 1813. It was built for the War of 1812. It turns out that Lieutenant James Hedges, who was the older brother of Josiah, he was stationed here during the War of 1812. He came through this area with General William Harrison, and he got a chance to see what this area looked like. After the war, James Hedges told his brother Josiah, hey, the forests and lands here are extremely fertile. You should come and check this area out. If you're looking to strike out and open a new area and start your own town, this would be the perfect place to do it. In 1817, before Josiah Hedges got here, Erastus Bull came to this area, and he opened up a tavern and built his home across the north side of Sandusky River there, which is now where the intersection of Frost Parkway and North Washington Street's at. He called his home or his tavern the Pan Yan. He became the first permanent settler in Seneca County, and what we have here is a painting showing what his cabin looked like. The painting was done in 1833 by a person who lived here and who more likely had seen this particular view and remembered it and painted it. And what we're looking at is the cabin. Now, across the Sandusky River, which you really can't see in the painting, was what would eventually become the town of Tiffin. And the town of Tiffin, or that area of land at that time, was basically a dense woods. It was filled with wolves and other wild animals. And it was a very unsettled area, but it was where the beginnings of Tiffin would eventually come. If you want to know roughly where the area of Erastus Bowes' cabin was, you can go down to the corner of North Washington Street and Frost Parkway. We have posted on a sidewalk a decal celebrating the 200 years of Erastus Bowe when he came in 1817. 2017, that sticker was there. We put a new one up, and again, that'll give you a little history and give you a feel of roughly where in the area the cabin was located. Now, this is a map showing the area of the, we were talking about from 1813 to 1819. This is before Josiah Hedges arrived. We have here in 1813, the Fort Ball complex was built, and it was located roughly where the Monument Square is along Frost Parkway. You'll see the Indian Maiden statue that was signifying where a spring was. That was where that fed water for the fort. Not far from there, over towards the intersection, would be 1817, would be where the Pan Yan and where Erastus Bowe became our first settler. He was not far from the fort. In 1819, we show to the west side of the fort, which by then was all taken down, where the first sawmill was built, and it used the river as a power source to run the sawmill. Now, sawmill is important because back in the early days, if you didn't have a sawmill, everything had to be built by logs. You had log cabins, log buildings. A sawmill allowed you to take logs and cut them up into boards and frames, and you could make a much more modern building instead of nothing but logs. So that in 1819 was a very important development for this area. Also, Jesse Spencer, he laid out the village of Oakley, but no record was made, no survey was actually submitted. So this area, which we show the town of Fort Ball, went by various different names. It went by Oakley, it went by a town called Vancetown, and eventually they settled with the name Fort Ball. So it was a very early community that really wasn't really organized. Down in the picture, you can see the future location of Tiffin. Nothing was there except the woods. Now, Josiah Hedges, well, I got to back a slide up here, one too far. Okay. From the years 1820 to 1822, Josiah Hedges actually arrives. In 1820, he traveled to the Fort Ball area, and he basically stated that he had an interest in buying the land. In 1821, across the river where Fort Ball was at, the town of Fort Ball, Robert Armstrong transferred to Jesse Spencer the ownership of all the lands on the Fort Ball side of the river. So they already got a jump on this area. They are trying to develop a community. In 1821, Josiah Hedges went down to the Delaware Land Office and purchased the land that became the center part of the Tiffin, Ohio area. His brother, James Hedges, came from Mansfield and surveyed this land for him and laid out the original streets that we see roughly in this map today. You can see on the map in the red, 1821 is where the first cabin was built. It was built along in Perry Street, not far from Rock Creek. In 1822, Hedges built a sawmill on his own side of the river. That would be down next to a mill race that was developed, and where this sawmill would be roughly in the middle of the football field where Heidelberg plays their football games. That's where this mill was, or this sawmill was located. The first frame building was located on Court Street. That was built in 1822. Other very important information there is that the state commissioners designated Tiffin as the seat of Seneca County. Both Fort Ball and the city of Tiffin, the early city of Tiffin, they were both battling to see who would get this designation. It was very important because it meant that if you were the seat of Seneca County, you would have a better chance of developing and getting bigger and stronger as you went. Tiffin was named after Edward Tiffin. He was the first governor of the state of Ohio. He was named Tiffin by Josiah Hedges. They were both friends, and not only was it because of a friendship, but because of the fact that Hedges was smart. He knew that if he would name the town after the first governor of the state of Ohio, it would give him a chance to possibly bring in more of a development, more state help, more interest into our community. So not only was it was a good memorial to his friend Edward Tiffin, but it also was a smart business move in helping to grow our town. Now, we mentioned that the town of Fort Ball and the town of Tiffin were kind of battling all the time for who would be the town that would be the best or the one that would develop the quickest. In the 1820s, this was happening a lot. One example of that is that in the early 1820s, Jesse Spencer, who owned the lands on the north side of the river at Fort Ball, he built what's called a brush dam on the Sandusky River to help funnel water more from the river and into his mill to run his sawmill. Josiah Hedges on the Tiffin side of the river didn't like that. He felt that he was stealing water from the Tiffin side of the river. So one night he sent out a bunch of guys, and in the middle of the night they busted the dam apart and broke it and allowed the river to go through again and cut the water off from Jesse Spencer's mill. Spencer took Josiah Hedges to court and sued him for this, for the damage that was done, for $500. But the court awarded Jesse Spencer that he was correct in being able to sue, but they only awarded him $8 as a punishment to Hedges. Well, this didn't sit well with either one of them, and after the trial there was a fight, and Josiah Hedges, who was a very big man as far as stature-wise at the time, he ended up getting with a fight with Spencer, and he ended up knocking him out. It was a fist fight. As it turns out, Josiah Hedges was arrested, and he was actually the very first prisoner to spend time in the jail that he had built in his own county, or in his own town. So that was the kind of things that were going on in the early days. There was a lot of competition, and sometimes it got a little ugly. Now, this is the first frame building that was built in Tiffin, and it was used for a lot of things. It was initially used as a courthouse, also used as a Masonic hall. It was used for offices, and it actually had a jail in for a while. This, of course, is a building that was built in 1822, and when this photograph was taken, it was in pretty bad shape. It was just before it was washed away in the 1913 flood. But it actually sat on Court Street. And this is a sketch of how Tiffin looked in 1841. We're looking at an arrow pointing down to where that building was, and it was on Court Street. And it would have been right about where the little parking lot is behind where the bank used to be. We can see on the right there the original courthouse, how it looked in 1841. But as you can see, Tiffin was a very, very pioneer settlement at that time. Not a whole lot of big buildings, a lot of small towns, or a lot of small buildings and houses, businesses. Eventually this building, the old 1822 building, was picked up and moved down along the river, and it was used for a business down there. But in 1913, when the flood came through, it picked the building up and washed it down the river, never be seen again. So that part of history was washed away. Other things that the Hedges did to help develop the city was to put in a grist mill. A grist mill is a mill that is used to grind the grains of like wheat and corn to make it so that it can be used for cooking and baking and things like this. The original mill was built in 1822 along the river there, Riverside Drive, and it was made from wood, but it was destroyed by fire in 1875. After that, it was rebuilt by brick. And this is the building that was there in the early 1800s, early 1900s. This building also burned down or was severely damaged, and they took the top floor off. But basically this building was built on the foundation of the first 1822 mill, and it is still there today in the Pioneer Mill restaurant. So when you go down there, you're actually walking into history of where the mill was originally at. And it's kind of a neat thing to be able to experience. In 1828, Josiah Hedges gave money for the first public school. That was located on the northwest corner of East Market and Monroe Streets. And it was just a small one-room brick building with room enough to hold 60 students. The building was there until 1844, and it was used until then, but in the meantime, they had built a bigger and better school. Where this location would be is where the old Fort Bank is, right across from City Hall. Hedges also donated in 1831 3 acres of land for the citizens of Tiffin for a cemetery. We can see on the map on the left here, an old map showing the Tiffin burying ground, and that would be right along Rock Creek. You can see Rebecca Street on the one side, and Tiffin Street was on the other side. And this is where citizens of Tiffin were buried until around the early 1900s. Unfortunately, that land would flood an awful lot. Rock Creek would erode the ground, so they basically changed it from a cemetery, and they moved the people out to Greenlawn when it was developed, and they turned it into a city park. Today, that is Hedges Park. On the right is a old postcard showing what the park looked like back then. Today, it's a little more developed, and there was a couple streets added that weren't there back in those days. But that originally was the original cemetery for Tiffin. Another important development in Tiffin that has with the help of Josiah Hedges was when the railroad came to Tiffin. The Mad River and Lake Erie Railroad arrived in 1841, and this was extremely big news for our area because it allowed much more merchandise to come and go out of Tiffin and to Tiffin to help businesses grow. It brought important people to our town, and it came basically from Sandusky to Tiffin and went on further after that to other places. Josiah Hedges, he was very instrumental in bringing this here. He was the original stockholder, and he was the director of this venture. And what we see on the right is a view of, or a drawing of what was called the Sandusky. It was built in Schenectady, New York, and it was the first locomotive to arrive in Tiffin back in 1841. And this was, again, a really important thing for our community. It really helped us prosper. Now, where did Hedges live? Well, in his early part of his life, and when the town was getting developed, homes were going up here and there, and he picked the location of his home to be on the corner of East Market and Jefferson Street. Okay, and basically he lived here until his later years. The house was eventually torn down, and this is where East Junior High is today. So this kind of shows you where his house was at. He died in the Great Western Hotel, which was located on South Washington Street, where the Civil War Museum is now. This is an old picture of the building, but this is where Josiah Hedges lived his final years, and this is where he passed away. Here is a handbill showing Josiah Hedges' announcement of his death. This is what they would hand out to the people of Tiffin. Very few of these exist, but this explains that he died at the age of 80 years and 3 months. So from his obituary, we learned that he was a stout, athletic, vigorous man, and these qualities were things that he retained into his old days. He was a big man and a strong man. He was very generous and just in his dealings with fellow men, and he was very honest. He was not a member of any church, but he donated the lots upon which most of the churches in Tiffin were built on. He gave them to the churches. He was a friend of the poor and known for his leniency and kindness to them. He was a good citizen and a true steadfast friend. As a husband, he was kind and obliging, and as a father, he was affectionate, generous, and indulgent. And he had 14 children. In all of his relations of life, private or public, he was a just and sincere man. He's buried at Green Lawn Cemetery, and you can go by and see where his plot is. You can see it's marked by this big headstone, and is surrounded, is in the circle are a lot of his family members. He also had a statue made by his relatives. They made a statue of him. It stands 6 foot 6 inches tall. It was in the courthouse lawn there one time, but it was moved to the entrance of Hedges Boyer Park, where it stands today. And examples of hedges can be found all over the place these days. When you develop your own town, you're allowed to name the streets after people in your relation. Of course, Hedges Street's named after Josiah Hedges. Harris and Minerva Streets were named after Hedges' daughter, Minerva, and her husband, Harrison Noble. There's Rebecca Street, named for his wife, Rebecca Russell. Russell Street was also named for his wife's last name. There's Sarah Street, named after his daughter, Sarah Hedges Armstrong. Charlotte Street, named after Josiah Hedges' granddaughter. Charlotte was also a name of the daughter of William Hedges. There's Hunter Street, named after William Hunter, son-in-law of Josiah Hedges. Alita Street, named after Josiah Hedges' great-great-granddaughter. And there's other streets out there that we didn't mention that were named after him. We'd like to also recommend that you keep in mind that the bicentennial of Tiffin happens in just a couple of years in 2022. So we're all going to be working to try to make this a special celebration and hope that everybody gets involved and is able to enjoy an important date in our local history, the 200th anniversary of the founding of Tiffin. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and hope that the rest of the day is fun and everybody learns more items about our history. Thank you very much.